Yeah, yeah, well, it's all right.
Okay, so it's telling me we're live, Simon, and you can hear me,
We are.
which is good.
Yes, the technology's working today,
Yes.
amazingly, in spite of us.
And I'll just, but yeah, and it's saying that we're live too
Just
on
go.
my on my phone here, which is great. So I'll just freeze that.
Do that. Get rid of that.
Awesome.
Do that. Yes, and there we are.
Hey,
Live.
hey.
There we are. Cool.
So how was your
Somebody in the
trip?
chat.
I kept up with what you were on some of your Facebook posts.
Yeah. Oh, lovely. We just went to Cornwall, which is southwest corner of England, for the weekend. Went on Saturday and came back yesterday. We went to scatter my aunt's ashes on, well,
Wow.
not scatter them, but bury them in the garden. So she's obviously a close family member. So we went for the weekend to do that. It was lovely, really cool. Yeah, you know, those
Did you
things
take a
like
guitar with you?
I didn't take a guitar. No, I tend not to take a guitar to those things because I've had actually, yeah, it's good for actually it's good for that, good for my poor old hands not to play too much during the so if I have a couple of days off, that's quite good for them.
Are you looking forward to your guitar holiday?
Oh yeah, yes, yes, yes. It's part of it. I tell you, only part of it, of course, is the guitar. The guitar is great, and I I learned last year. I'm not a great guitar player, and I probably wasn't. I was probably the worst guitar player there in terms of skills. But in a sense, some of it is just about saying, I'm, I'm not going to get, I'm not up here. That's fine. But if I can get four or five things down at my level, things to work on, things to do, things to focus on, actually, it's done its job. And, you haven't got to worry about whether they're all better than you. They were all better than me. And that's, I don't feel about that. Anything about that. Good morning, John.
Yeah, I
Oh,
caught
is it?
up with
Oh, I
yeah.
wonder who that is. Yes,
I,
of course.
I caught up with Carl a couple
Right.
of days ago, and we had a bit of a jam session and
Oh,
worked out
brilliant.
a couple of tunes that we're going to practice and hopefully nail the next time we get together. But yeah, Simon, it's one thing playing along to a backing track, one thing playing along to an Eric
Whatever.
Clapton or a Stone song. But it's nothing like playing with another guitar player or in a band.
Oh, completely. Yeah, yeah. They're completely different things, isn't it? When it's somehow with a backing track or playing along with a record or whatever, you kind of got an inkling of what's happening next, haven't you? I
Yeah,
always think there's that kind of like, you could play just a tiny bit behind and just kind of
yeah,
go, it's going to work. I'm all right. Whereas with a band, it's like, well, there's nobody in front of you. You've just, you have the open highway to. And going back to my guitar thing, one of the great things about you notice about those pro guitar players, people like I'm an aerial poser particularly, but is they just step off the cliff. They don't care. They just go. I'm just going to start playing. And I've seen quite a lot of live things of his, and I don't know whether it's true, but I'm going to ask him. But it seems that he basically what he does, he'll just start and he'll kind of sometimes it starts off and it's all a bit angular and it's all a bit I'm not quite sure where I'm going and what I'm doing. I'm quite feeling it. And then he'll kind of get he'll get a vibe, he'll get a feel, get a groove, and he'll start, and you can see it coming, 10, 15, 20 seconds into the thing. He'll just start and you think, I wish I could do that. I wish I wasn't that scared of, making a complete car crash of the whole thing. But just be able to step off that and have the kind of technique and the knowledge to be able to, And what's interesting in the last year is that, and I've concentrated on the basics, on just understanding like where notes are in the all over the neck. So you can do a little solo. If you're playing an E, you've got all the different places on the neck you can play, and you can play something. So you can go over onto the A box, but in E and play something there, or you can play in B, or you can really interesting. And I've just concentrated on practicing on those, and I'm sure I've improved a lot by doing those things.
You'll be surprised, Simon, actually, how much you do improve being a guitar player, because in a, I'm a little bit like you too. You know, when I try and improve every time I play the guitar, and when I say improve, to try and um, um, understand where I might be putting my finger in a particular position on a pentatonic scale.
Yeah.
You,
Hmm. Yeah.
you know, without trying to go um, in a formalistic kind of way, and only another
Yeah.
guitar player can understand what I'm trying to express here. But
Yeah.
but I don't have a problem, Simon, if I'm playing an A up here,
Yeah.
doing a pentatonic scale. I don't have a problem coming down here or up here, going
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
E.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't need to be worrying about working out some kind of method on how to get down here or up here. I'm,
Yeah.
I'm quite happy just to go here.
Whereas I've been sort of doing the method of how do you get from here up to here? How can you,
Okay.
what is the kind of run and the finger thing that gets you moving across the up and across the fretboard and stuff to enable you to do that. And it's those are the everyone knows them, and I'm just learning them, which is fine. But so I feel as though that's part of it. You learn those four or five, those basic things, the things that you can think about and really practice. I really tried to sort of focus my practicing on doing that quite a lot. I
I
mean, the other
suppose.
thing is that it
it-
has nothing to do, of course, with guitar playing, which is just to go somewhere where
yeah.
you don't have the noise of your family,
Yeah.
the kids, the general melee of life. I mean, in this village, and it took me till Wednesday last year to realise that the hotel we're staying in had no televisions.
Great.
Not a single television. I only noticed for 3 days, 4 days. It was good, and that's a good thing, not a bad thing.
I suppose that's probably a good introduction for us into the topic of this show, because
Mm.
the album that we're going to talk about is basically a guy that's playing a pentatonic scale, the major and the minor pentatonic scale. Nothing flash, nothing fancy,
Nope. Nope.
just a solid pentatonic scale with a couple of blues notes thrown in, and that's the Beano album.
Yes, indeed. The mighty Eric Clapton. Yeah. It's been fascinating to sort of go and look at it, and I mean I haven't listened to I don't listen to things, a lot of things and that from, so I went back and listened to it with a bit more of a critical ear and stuff, and yeah, it's the first thing I tell you what struck me is that album, the Beano album, and was the same kind of thing as the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. I don't know if you know the Paul Butterfield Blues Band, the American, with Mike
Yeah,
Bloomfield on
yeah, we've
guitar.
discussed it on some of the phone
Sim-
shows.
Similar sort of record with a similar sort of, not the same sound, but a similar kind of vibe and what they wanted to do.
Yep.
Different, different sound completely. But yeah, which is interesting. That kind of that parallel between young white guys playing the blues and kind of wanting to get somewhere with it, wanting to feel as though they could, had a sound in their head, had something they wanted to do, and obviously, went into recording studios and did it. I mean, Mike Bloomfield's a great guitar player.
Well, Bloomfield was lucky enough to actually go to Chicago and hang out with some of these black cats.
That's right, yeah.
Those British dudes couldn't do that.
No, well, of course. Well, I mean, Clapton had toured with Sonny Boy Williamson, hadn't he?
Yeah.
Sonny Boy. So what did he? Sonny Boy Williamson said, "These British boys want to play the blues bad, and boy, do they play the blues bad!
So bad. Yeah, they want to play the
So
blues
bad,
so bad.
so bad." That's right. Which is that's a wonderful take on it. I think
It's a bit disrespectful.
fine. It's absolutely fine. I can understand completely the sort of cultural misappropriation of your music might make across. I mean, I think on the kind of what he's leaving out is that yeah, they took what he had and they made it something else. But also, those guys got quite a lot of reflective stuff out of it. I mean, they sometimes they got credit for the songs that were theirs, and sometimes they didn't. But but those, if you think about the resurgence of those blues guys like Muddy Waters and stuff in the '60s, because of the Stones, because of because of Clapton, because of the white guys playing that Chicago blues thing, those guys went from playing clubs, to playing much, theatres and stuff, and kind of being able to make a living for the next 10 or 15 years off the back of it. So I think it's, good old Sonny Boy, I mean, notoriously grumpy.
Yeah. And we've mentioned that before, haven't we? That one of the reasons, that we have some admiration for these British cats is that, they put them in a position where they could make some money because they weren't making any money from their music.
No, and and I don't think you can underestimate that as a kind of as a sort of they weren't going anywhere themselves, and these young white blues guys from Chicago, the UK, taking it somewhere else, making it more, they got something out of that. They got careers out of it, because I mean, people like Buddy Guy and stuff like that. I mean, Eric Clapton was always they were on tour with them and they did stuff with them, as well. I mean, if Eric Clapton did a album with BB King in the '90s, kind of, So I think there's always been that, certainly from Clapton, that there's always been that recognition of his roots and where he got his music from, and those guys. And I don't think he's ever kind of, he's ever sort of appropriated it for his own, without saying where the roots come from and stuff. It's always been there and clear.
Oh, always, loud and clear. Even to the point where he formed, where he reformed Cream in 2005, so that Ginger and especially Ginger, they could make some money.
Yeah. Yes, and completely. And that kind of, and I think that there's, but also, what they played, those estates would have benefited from what they played.
Yep.
What they did, they were doing blues standards, and those estates benefited from those things,
Was there anything was there anything that stuck out in your mind when you were doing your listening research over the last week? Was there anything in particular?
I think that what stuck out is that that even now that record has power. It has something about it. And that kind of and obviously reading about it and it's kind of going. I could see what they were trying to do. That kind of trying to, like lots of bands from that, then trying to recreate what you do live in the studio. That kind of eternal. Well, not now because they don't do it now, but in that it was always that kind of how do I recreate what I do live in a club or in a recording studio. Hence, for instance, they all played live, of course. They all played together in one room live. With baffles between them and all of that. But the bleed and the things like that, which go over into the different instruments, which make things a bit difficult. I think it makes it less difficult.
I think for me, that album certainly, it's the key. It's the key, Simon. If you listen to that album, if you're a Led Zeppelin nut, and I know people that have listened to a couple of songs that are Led Zeppelin nuts over the years, and you get them to listen to some of those songs, they stand there and go, "Holy cow!" Yeah. And if you say that that's something that came out, quite a few years before Led Zeppelin, it's a key to unlocking, obviously, where that sound came from, and
of course, Jimmy Page had recorded the Blues Breakers doing that track, hadn't he? I'm your witch doctor.
Yeah,
he'd actually recorded as the house producer in the whatever. But yeah, I mean, oh yes, you can see that, that kind of the circle, can't you? That, Clapton comes along, does one thing, gets an idea, and then that idea gets appropriated by later on by Page, by Beck, and by, and it's that development thing. I've done, that's a good idea. Let's see what we can do with that.
It
Amazing.
blows me away, though. March 1966, Simon.
Yeah.
That you compare that album to Rubber Soul, which came out in '66, for example.
Yeah. It's a completely different thing, isn't it? Completely. Yeah. And you have difficulty with kind of tracing a line between the Beano album and Rubber Soul.
I've had friends who have told me, Facebook friends who have told me that they've listened to some parts of that album, and they've picked that album 72, 73 just on hearing it the first time, not realizing anything about it until they discover it's actually 66. A lot of people go, "What, really?"
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right, isn't it? Because you think of that great blues, British blues thing being the late 60s, the early 70s, going the mid 70s, that you think to yourself, you know what, it's very much, it sounds like, I'm not taking, but it sounds like Free, something like that, and you go, oh, look, well, but not realizing that, Free went around in 66. It's a slight problem with history, but so yeah, but it's the interesting thing about what came first, and that came first, and what came before it, and there's almost a line in the sand, isn't there, between what was before it, in terms of British blues recording and stuff like that, and then what came after it, what that album introduced in terms of both, Eric's playing particularly, but the way he recorded, what he used, his kit, and all of those things is for me, a game changer. I read something, that within weeks of that album appearing, people seeing Eric with with his Marshall, 50-watt Marshall, and his Les Paul. People all over the country were going out and buying Marshalls and Les Pauls because that had become the sound. Bang, and you can see that even with.
I've come across the same research with people too. People were throwing away Les Pauls. Les Pauls weren't considered cool instruments, and the only reason why Eric picked up that Les Paul is because of his favorite artist at the time. Not Albert King. Who's the other one?
Buddy Guy?
No.
Buddy Guy?
The guy that died when he was 42. The Texan, the black guy. Oh. Where's someone in the chat?
It's very early in the morning. Freddie King.
Freddie King. Yeah,
Freddie King. One of the three Kings. Yeah.
Because Freddie King had a Les Paul, so that's the only reason why he bought it.
Yeah. And it was probably cheap as well, wasn't it? I mean, if it wasn't, if they weren't very well thought of. I think it cost him 120 quid. There you are. You'd be happy if you bought a 120 quid guitar that was worth $250,000 now, wouldn't you?
Does it matter what year it is? Does it matter that it's a 59 or a 60?
Or a 60? No, yeah. I don't think so. I mean, I think it's in that sweet spot, isn't it? The 58 to 60. Though it's other than that, whether it's got a thinner neck or a thicker neck, I'm not sure that. I think it's probably like all guitars, if you get a good one, you get a good one, and I swear that not all of those 58 to 60 Les Pauls will be great guitars. I cannot believe they're all great guitars. The mystique around them is fine, and I get that, but I cannot believe that if you played 10 of them, that all of them would be, one or two of them would be, you think, wow, there it is, And I went to see, talking of 58 Les Pauls, 59 Les Pauls, I went to see Ariel Posen recently in a club near us with a friend of mine, and he had one of his guests was Bernie Marsden,
yes,
the White Snake guitarist, and he bought the Beast and he played the Beast,
wow.
by God, you could, this great growling monster of a guitar, and that's what you go, all right, now I'm in a club. Now I can really hear it, It's not in the Albert Hall. I'm in a club, And this kind of huge, kind of rich, kind of, round sound that you go, yeah, I don't need to hear it for very long to understand why that's a great guitar, It's got a great sound.
Yeah, I read somewhere recently that Peter Green is sure that it's a 1960 because his Les Paul was a 58, and he said that the neck was thin and had a fast action, which sounds again.
Yeah, it sounds more 60 than 59. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what. And was it Joe Bonamassa said that he knew where the guitar was, didn't he? He said because it got stolen. It got stolen, doesn't it? When the early days of Cream, and he
So that
said
means
that
it's an influential person must have it then, because he hasn't been the person.
No, he hasn't. No, but he's in a private guitar collection in America, and he said about it that he said he thought it was a 59. He said it was a 59, not a 60. But Clapton has said it's got a really slim neck, which means it would be a 60, not a 59. I don't know. Who knows? I mean, in those days, what do you think? It could easily have been two guitars put together. 60 neck and a 59. I don't mean, I'm just making that up. But it in those days, those guys messed around with things, didn't they? There wasn't that kind of, sacred relic view of the 59 Les Paul that there is now. You take it out, you'd beat it around the bush and
well you're right
on it, or
because it was a lot of women that were manufacturing the guitars too at Gibson. So we've got a 60 neck here and a 59 body left over here. We've got to use the stock up,
put them together. Tip
it in,
kind of bound together. And I don't know whether you're at the latter end, the beginning of 1960, as you say. I've got it. Because let's be fair, at some point you've got a neck and you've got a body, and they're separate, aren't they? And you put them together, and somebody put them together, and it's a hybrid, and it's whatever. So I'd believe almost anything about it, really. And I think that the only this thing you can say is that it's in that sweet spot of the 3 years. It's one of those guitars, and he thought it was a good guitar and got a good sound out of it. Therefore, what makes it important really is what he did with it. In my books, that's what makes it an important guitar. What he did, not to 59, 60 Les Paul, whatever. I think it's probably immaterial in many ways.
Can we also credit Eric Clapton to popularizing the combo amp?
We can, didn't he? Because I read that because he went to Marshall and said, "I want an amp that will fit in my car."
Yep.
Not obviously 412s and stuff in it, and so apparently he was instrumental in getting Jim Marshall to make the JCM 45, which is so that he was able to put it in the boot of his car and cart it around, and yet it was loud enough to do the job in the clubs and stuff. So I think that they wouldn't have had a combo amp without Eric.
So did they?
Too bold a claim.
Did the English clubs back then have a PA system, Simon, or were they just playing on the stage?
I very much doubt whether they had a PA. If anything, that they might handle, MC vocals. So I have going back to what I was talking to earlier. This record shop I worked in, I worked for a lovely guy called Tony Dodd, and he was like he played rock and roll in the 60s and stuff, in the early 60s in Bristol. And he was in a group called Mike Tobin and the Magnets. And he had a photograph of Mike Tobin and the Magnets playing at the Colston Hall, which is the local, I've mentioned it before, the local municipal hall, 2,000-seater, owned by the city council. And there's a picture of them on the stage. And it's by today's standards, you think, first, basically, the only PA you can see are those very long, kind of thin strip PAs. I don't know if you've ever seen them. Kind of like on. So they're on either side of the stage, and then there's the drummer, and then there's two guitar players and a bass player. The two guitar players are plugged into the same amp. So they're standing together. So they're obscuring the amp completely. The bass player's got an amp. So basically, there's just these Then there's obviously a singer. So there's four guys. You can just hear drum kit and a bit of amp and these two tiny PA speakers on a and I went, 10 years later to see, I don't know, Deep Purple or Black Sabbath. They'd have floor to ceiling PA, these massive PAs. It was really funny, and yet that's what they played with at the Colston Hall, to 2,000 people or whatever. It's very funny. So I think most clubs like that really might have had, PA speakers, things like that. But you brought your own PA. They absolutely had to bring their own PA and all their own kit. Hence the sort of transit vans with stuff in them. So I think that, it would be interesting to know because because obviously you get in the 70s and you've got massive PAs and loud. So how the vocals actually fared in those clubs. Whether how much kit they had to carry to get that to get enough vocal sound or whatever. I presume they didn't. I presume there wasn't much putting the instruments through the PA. I could be wrong about that. I mean, in clubs you probably tend to just put the vocals and and carry on, didn't you? I would have thought it's easier. I don't know.
I'm interested in the fact that you've mentioned vocals. I have a love-hate relationship with that album, and I think on a Peter Green show that you and I and Carl did last year, I think I mentioned it back then that some of the vocals on that album, it's an acquired taste. Listening to John, it's an acquired taste, and
he's not the world's great vocalist, is he? But I think in a sense you have to say what he did. His band, and you sing and you do stuff. Some of it fits better than others, I think. Yep. I think but he had one of those bands where a lot of great musicians went through it, and he didn't seem to have held them back or anything. He'd get Eric for an album, and then he'd get Mick Taylor, and then and these guys, and he'd keep rolling these guys through, and then he'd keep going off and being in, really big bands and stuff. So his eye for talent is cannot be denied.
Some of the vocals that he did are very good. Some of the early live recordings that they've got on Spotify. We're lucky to have Spotify, and I think it's been picked up on YouTube. There's a live album that he's featuring on with Peter Green from '67. But if you listen to "Lonely Years," which Vernon says is one of the best.
Fender, can you hang on one second? Somebody.
Sure.
At the door. Hold on, just 1 second. I'm busy.
You guys see me? Rock and roll, man. So this is my lemon drop, guys. This is my cheap version of a Les Paul. But don't be fooled into thinking that these vintage lemon drops are a cheap guitar and therefore must sound pretty cheap, because they don't.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
It's what happens when you live in the country. Somebody's found a lost dog. Do I know anyone with a chocolate Labrador? No, I don't. Perhaps we could say hi to Sonia, Jimmy T.
Yep.
Todd, AK Soda Pop. Yeah. Hi guys, how you doing? Hope you're good.
Yeah. So if you're listening to "Lonely Years" or Bernard Jenkins, which are songs that aren't featured on that album but are on Spotify, boy, they sound pretty good. That good. "Lonely Years" is a bloody good song.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I think, given the right, as I said, given the right setting, given the right song, he does fine, John Well. But you're right, on some of them. And I wonder if that's actually, and I know he went and redid some of the vocals on it, but I do wonder if some of that's, that kind of speed working, you go in, you do one or two takes, and possibly somebody pushing him a bit harder in terms of, being able, go back and do it again, John. You can do better than that kind of thing. Might have made it better. I don't
Yeah,
know. That you went for, inevitably you get this thing speed. Get for quickness. You get the feel. You get the vibe. Is it a good vibe on a take? Is it is it working? Is it is it does it work? Does it have a groove? Does it have a feel? And then you go, well, that's fine. That's what we're going to go with. And you don't worry too much about the mistakes or whatever else there are.
Well, that was
But,
basically their set, wasn't it? Well, part of their set.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Yes, and all that kind of, there's definitely their stated aim was to go into the studio and make a live album in the studio, make it as it was, what they sounded like live in the studio, which and they obviously had to spend quite a lot of time, doing it, setting it up, and getting it organised because because of what Eric did. If Eric comes in and says, right, I want to turn my amp right up and record it, in those days, that was, I think, from what I read, that seemed to be, you're pushing everything into the red, you're looking for that distortion and stuff like that, and the recording engineers, don't like that.
Well, again, all credit to John and to Mike Vernon, because they turned around and said, do what he's saying.
Do what he's saying, yeah. There wasn't an argument about it. It was, how can we do it, wasn't it? It's very sort of, it's a very British thing, isn't it? We're not having an argument about whether you can or not. We'll just go, yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, we'll find a way of doing it.
Yeah.
Yes, go and so.
Yeah.
I mean, I've read, for instance, that Eric was, he very influential in where they put the mics to record him. So, normally you put the mic right up against him, just offset. Well, they put the mics further back, so as if the microphone was more in the audience. So you've got more of a kind of in the room vibe of recording him, rather than that kind of very close,
So he knew,
close up to the.
He knew what he wanted.
So he knew what he wanted, and had some idea that putting the microphone, 2 or 3 feet away from the speaker, was a way of recording it in a different way to putting it, just offset, right up against the speaker, but just offset kind of thing, which is probably, and then keeping the volume down so you didn't have any distortion, and and so obviously you weren't driving your needles into the red when you recorded it and stuff like that, and being able to recreate that sound, because that's the sound you got in the club. Was you cranked it up, and you let fly with a Les Paul, and and to me that's the interesting bit, that they were able to do it, able to ignore the tech, in a sense. I think the best thing about all those records is, sorry, that being confined by the technology you've got and having to be creative about getting round the restrictions that those technologies give you, only being able to record in 4-track, nobody wants it to go into the red and all those things, I think it's, but people going, no, I want you to push it into the red. I want you to do something else, how can we get it so I can put, other things on it, when the Beatles were brilliant at, saying to George Martin, I want him to go, and he'd go away and fix it, and
Yep. And that's correct. And that you're right. They were saying this is what we want. You had the Beach Boys doing the same thing too.
Yeah. I think one of the interesting things is, and I don't know that, obviously George Martin particularly, but I presume Mike Vernon, they weren't of the same. They're not the same era as the Beatles, and they're obviously older people, but they obviously weren't restricted by that. They didn't say you can't do that. I think I had a brilliant interview with Frank Zappa saying that in the 60s. Loads of records, loads of experimental, all sorts of stuff got released because the old guys were in charge, and they said, "We've no idea what this is, but it might sell. Let's put it out," And then they got the young hip cats in who said, no, that's rubbish. We're not putting that out, you know. So you didn't get that completely kind of indiscriminate. Yeah, why not? Let's go. Let's see where it goes, you know.
Yeah, well, a
And I
little bit
think
like
that,
Jimmy Miller. Jimmy Miller's sort of in that
yeah,
same vein too. You know, he wasn't that much older than the Stones. Had an idea of the sound that he thought that they should be reproducing, and they understood it clearly. So, yeah, certainly a partnership back then to a great degree. Whereas, you know, if you look at the music now, it's all, you know, and I don't want us to, you know, go on a wild tangent, but you know, certainly we know that it's the producers now that determine how it is.
you know, and how that all works, and you know, you know, and in a sense, that kind of young hipness is as much of a deterrent for as anything else. You know, these guys were, you know, quite, you know, the old guys were quite conservative, but because they didn't understand it and they didn't pretend to understand it or pretend to have any concept, you know, they say, well, put it out, see what it does.
Yeah,
You know, and
I agree. Yeah, I
and I think
I
that,
think one of
you
the
know,
key
that
things
hats
though
off
that the
to,
British recording industry had though is you know, they certainly weren't scared to give it a go. I know that the Beatles, for example, were instrumental in changing a lot of that that
yeah,
stiffness that they had. I remember
the white coats.
yeah, white coats, yeah, exactly, you know, and just, you know, having that laid back environment. But certainly Vernon doesn't get probably anywhere near the credit that he should do as a contributor to that whole British scene.
Yeah, and having his, you know, and being able to just, you know, but you can see, you know, they hadn't been, Decca had turned them down, hadn't they? And then they kind of might go and said, well, we might do something. So they said, all right, sign them up, you know. They sign them up for an album, you know, and they don't do any interfering. Don't, you know, Decca don't do anything. You know, they just let them get on with it, you know, and record an album and they put it out. Which is kind of my point, isn't it? You know, that these, you know, the besooted guys in their 40s, 50s, whatever, you know, don't pretend to understand it. The kids might like it and buy it. Oh, well, record it and put it out. Here's some money, you know.
Yeah. Do you have any
Obviously not.
standout tracks? Is there are there any tracks in particular on that album that you love?
I like the Ray Charles, because I like that song. You know, what I'd say. That's a great song, and I can remember that from my youth days. So that's one of it. And also, you know, obviously, let's not forget, you know, was it Eric's singing debut? Singing, was it Farther Out the Road or Ramble on My Mind? One of the two.
Rambling on my mind.
Ramble on My Mind, yeah. You know, and I think, you know, that actually, you know, does a pretty good job on it, to be honest, you know. And the things that interest me most about it is that you know, the quite long improvised bits on some of the tracks, you know, the end bits, you know, stretching them out into 5-6 minute things, you know, where it can really, which interestingly is, of course, what they did in the Yardbirds. If you listen to 5 Live Yardbirds, there's some tracks on there that kind of extend out, don't they, into kind of, you know, what we would call blues jams.
Well, I think a good example of that is "Have You Heard?" I love that song.
Yeah,
you know, they've got a brass section in there.
Yeah, as well.
It's phenomenal. You know, the sustain that he's using. Do you think, you know, that vibrato that he was using? Was he using the floating vibrato back then, or do you think he was using the vibrato with his fingers still choked around the neck? Do you think he was?
To be honest, I mean, he does the vibrato with it choked around the neck, doesn't he? Now, Eric, that seems to be his technique.
Well, for a long time it was floating. Yeah.
Did he float at the beginning? Did he? Yeah.
Well, I don't know, because there's a big discussion for Clapton nuts. You know, at what stage did he adopt that floating vibrato? Because it's pretty good on that album.
Is it? I wonder if it's the change from, you know, Gibson to Fender and stuff. You know? Later on, you have a different guitar, and a different kind of neck feel, because obviously a Fender will have a very different neck feel to a Gibson, about whether actually it's about your hand size and the technique, isn't it? You know, that you have to have, you know, if you've got a small neck guitar, I mean, I don't know how big Eric's hands are, but
I think you might be right there. I think he probably went to that floating technique when he switched over to the Strats.
yeah, could be, yeah. You know, that it could actually just be because I'm using different equipment and playing different guitars that I have to play in a different way. You know, or there's a different way I can do it. So maybe it's just that you know, that makes it different. But I don't know much about when he changed to that.
I know a lot of people, you know, when they talk about that album from a guitar playing perspective, they'll talk about Hideaway, which is obviously phenomenal, and
it's a bit of a standard, isn't it? You know,
yeah.
You know, I read that, you know, your standard audition piece for any band was to play Hideaway. You know, won't be tied if you got it wrong, but
you know, and Stepping Out's another song too that a guitar, and there's certainly songs that I would play to somebody who was a music fan. If someone said, "Look, you know, play a song," I'd play that song. I'd say, yeah, listen, this is what Eric Clapton was playing when he was 21 years old.
Yeah, 21. It's amazing, isn't it? You know.
So what do you think about that song, Rambling on My Mind? You mentioned it earlier. Did you like it?
I do, yeah. You know, and I think it's interesting from a historical point of view because it's the first time he sang.
Yeah.
You know, and first, you know, and you can obviously tell that, you know, that's important in his development as a musician, you know, to be able to, you know, just to be able to play, but then to be able to sing as well, you know, is a different skill, you know, and to be able to, you know, obviously in the Yardbirds, you know, they had Keith Ralph who sang, so he wasn't going to sing in that. But yes, that, you know, I think that it's really important that, you know, he finds a singing voice. And then obviously that, you know, you get into Cream and he, you know, that develops more.
I love that.
He goes on his solo tour.
I love it, Simon. I think he does a phenomenal job.
He's still playing it. You know, there's the proof. You know.
and you know, obviously, Clapton nuts like you and I and anybody else who's watching the show will understand and know clearly that link to Robert Johnson. You know, because he talks about him being such a huge influence on his development as a guitar player and a musician. But for him to play that song's no surprise for us now.
No, completely not now. But maybe then, I know that from this that, you know, he thought Johnson was quite out there, didn't he? He thought, you know, when he first heard him, he thought, "Blimey, that's a bit out there. Maybe I'll put that aside for a bit and concentrate on more of the Chicago guys." And, you know, obviously went back to him later and stuff. But I think
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. He could have picked a Muddy Waters song or something, but no, he was true to who he was as a blues fan, and wanted.
That's what he wanted, wasn't he? He wanted to play the blues authentically. And, I think that's you know, that's the for him, that single vision then of, you know, which is why he left the Yardbirds, of course, you know, For Your Love, not a blues song. I'm off.
20-year-old English guy, 1966, singing Rambling on My Mind. It kind of doesn't make sense.
No, but it kind of does in a way, because if you think that, you know, Robert Johnson was quite a shy bloke, you know, apparently recorded, you know, Facing the Curtain, you know, and stuff, you know, and that's kind of part of Eric, isn't it? That kind of...
I'm going to interrupt. Have you seen the latest Robert Johnson documentary on Netflix?
No.
Okay, it was released a couple of days ago. You need to see it.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Because according to that, Robert Johnson wasn't the shy guy we all thought he was.
Well, no, I was thinking to record now because he must have gone out and performed. And if he'd gone out and performed, then you have to have a performing persona, don't you?
Yeah.
You know, especially if you're going out on your own with an acoustic guitar, and you're trying to make money out of people by making them dance or whatever, you've got to have, the kind of band, you've got to have the performing persona. Now, whether that's, a lot of people have performing personas, don't they? They can turn on the what's it, the Alice Cooper thing, isn't it? Vince Vernier and Alice Cooper. I can turn on Alice Cooper, and and that's the performing bloke, but that's not Vince Vernier kind of thing. And I think that I don't know. You can take Joe Bonamassa is probably. I think he's probably quite shy, from what I understand. I know people who've met him, but he has a performing persona. And I think, if you, as I say, he's got a band, but if you're going out as a single guy with an acoustic guitar, and you're going to play in, whatever, bars and clubs and whatever, you have to develop a persona which will enable you to perform and reach the audience.
Jeremy,
I think on your own.
And Peter Green, perfect examples. Quiet, shy, reserved guys off stage, but on stage.
It all comes out, But, I don't think there's a single person with an acoustic guitar playing with your back to the audience is going to go well, really, is it? It's not going to endear you, is it? Money's not going to be, showering the stage, is it? If you're turning round.
You turn around and everybody's gone.
Yeah, everybody's gone. Playing to only yourself and the bar staff is, oh dear. Which I find that really irritating. But so I will look at it, but it would seem to me that I think maybe that kind of self-consciousness about recording is an interesting thing. I think there's going out and performing is one thing, and then recording is another thing. And requires
yes, by the devil.
Yeah. Yes, completely. Yeah. So I will look at it. I'm interested to see that. Fantastic.
Oh yeah. No, you need
it doesn't
to see
seem
it.
to be. It does. The two things don't seem to me to be incompatible. In a studio situation. I don't know. Have you done some recording? Have you been in studios and done some recording?
Yeah.
That kind of concentration on your own performance and stuff like that, and the way that you do it, and get inside yourself to do it is a different skill and a different thing to being on stage, foot on the monitor, giving it some. It's So I could see that maybe setting up with a man in a with a recording microphone and stuff like that is there's a different thing, different set of skills. But I'll be interested to see that. It'd be great.
Todd's asking what vibrato do I prefer. I'm a floater.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm a floater, but I mentioned on a show, Soda, a couple of months ago with Carl that I purposely implement now in my playing. What's that finger? Index finger? Is that the index finger?
That's the index finger.
Okay.
Careful what you're doing here. Yes.
When I play now, I implement a lot of first finger vibrato too, which is interesting because it's added a different dynamic. Because if you're using a scale, a pentatonic scale, normally it's your first finger. So what I try and do now is when I place my first finger, I try and do a bit of vibrato, which adds it before what I'm trying to do normally, because normally I would use my ring finger for my vibrato. So my vibrato is coming up faster.
Yeah. And that kind of twisty bit with your wrist to get it.
But it's all that. We all have different techniques. I think the great thing about techniques, though, is if you're that kind of person, is to just try different techniques and find something yourself.
No, completely, yeah. And I guess, as you actually say, use both depending on what you're doing, what guitars you're playing, I'll try that out later and see what I do with my Strat and my one of my Well, my Chapman, my Les Paul Chapman's got a much thicker neck than that. So if I do something different, that'd be interesting to know.
Yeah. I'd love to hear your feedback on the next show, Simon. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll give it a whirl.
Yeah,
Practicing hard for Italy.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that. So I'm mindful of the time that you're going to be getting ready soon.
So okay, we've got another 10 or 15 minutes. We're fine.
Awesome.
I think it'd be nice. I mean, going back to sort of the recording of the album. One of the things that interested me was, obviously they played in the same room.
Yes.
But because they wanted to get Eric, they kind of set him up and messed about until they could record him without destroying the recording equipment. But apparently they turned his amp towards the wall and put a massive blanket over the microphone and the amp to kind of try and enclose the sound without making it too different, and kind of and obviously so that it didn't get picked up too much by the other instrument mics and stuff like that. Which is amazing, the invention of right, we're going to put the microphone this far away from the speaker, rather than here, and then we need to contain it somewhere. So what we're going to do, well, let's put a heavy blanket over it and see if that still has the same, that kind of experimentation with recording sound.
And if nobody's actually played one of those Marshalls, I've been fortunate enough to go to the local music shop a couple of years ago where they had a reissue, and I was there on a Sunday and I plugged it in and played one of their guitars, and man, it's loud.
Yeah. You notice it, don't you?
So he would have he and by all accounts, Simon, he had it cranked, didn't he?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Turned right up, so you've got, because I mean, what's interesting, I think, is that that's the way you got the overdrive, the distortion, and the thickness of the sound. That Marshalls, of course, are based on Fender Bassemans, which are the essence of the clean sound, aren't they? And obviously Jim Marshall took it in a slightly different direction, but to get that, if you put a Fender Strat through the JCM 45. I don't think you get much, you have to go bigger, and, you have to do your 412 and your 100 watts. You have to do the Jimi Hendrix thing, with a fuzz pedal and stuff to get, that kind of distortion out of it, and that kind of, whereas, even with Les Paul, and I haven't got a Les Paul, but I've got a Chapman, a dual humbucker, a Seymour Duncan, which is, and I was having a go at with my PV, which is very much a Fender amp, clean. You turn it up to 6 or 7, thanks to the neighbours. Don't like it. But with the Seymour Duncans, and you get a tremendous noise out of it in a way that you don't get with the Fender. The difference between, one of my guitars has got a humbucker in the bridge and single coils, and you start get some volume on it, and you flick between the two, and there's a big difference between the volumes.
Yeah, I remember when I got my Vibrolux and I played my Strat through it, everybody left and I cranked it up, and you're right, it just would not break up on a Strat. No. But anything that had P90s like my Casino or anything else that had humbuckers, about 6 or 7, it would just crack up beautifully.
Yeah. Yes, it's really interesting. And I think that being able to record like that, and having the kit to match his kind of aggressive style and what he wanted to achieve is, 3/4 of the battle. And then being able to record it and to have to kind of ignore it really is take it as part of the sound I'm after, not going, that's terrible. Oh, distortion. We don't want that. Get rid of it. Stop that now.
What's interesting about that album from Clapton's perspective is, for a long, long time, Simon, from what I've read, he didn't pay much attention or give much credit to that album and that era in his life. It wasn't until his biography came out in 2008. Where he started paying that respect back to that era where he went and did a gig, didn't he, with John Mayall? I think one of his centenary tours or something, and and people were asking him, what do you think about people thinking this album's great, that it's a landmark, he said himself, well, for years I didn't pay much attention to it, but I suppose you're right. When you listen to that album and listen to what happened after it, you're right. So he's still humble about it.
Completely. And I think, knowing Eric, he's probably a bit equivocal about it, isn't he? He seems to be a bit equivocal of the sort of, Clapton is God, whatever else it is, kind of thing. He gets it, and then, but not entirely certain.
Do you think at the time he knew that he was doing something on a landmark scale? Do you think he had any idea?
Nope.
No.
I think he just did it. I think he just had a vision of what he wanted, and that kind of quite purist.
Just for that time, vision, it was something he wanted to do for that time.
Yeah, I've heard those Chicago blues guys, Buddy Guy, Muddy Waters, whatever, and that's what I want. I want to do my own version of that, or I want to do that. But, if you're somebody else doing it, then what happens is the osmosis of you doing it creates something slightly different, which I think is what happened. And it happened to be seminal, and all those other bands, that we know, Free, Zeppelin, took that sound and thought, that's the sound, that's it, took it on, do other stuff with it. I don't know why I can hear myself, and so echoey.
No, you're fine here. I kind of agree with you. I don't think he rubbed his hands together and went.
I don't think that's.
Yeah, I'm dominant, world domination. No,
I don't think that's at all. It was just that I want to capture the what we sound like live. And kind of get a sound that I've got in my head, that kind of big, slightly distorted, thick, sound that I can get out of this new kit that I've got. Because obviously he played a Telecaster and a Vox, I think, in the Yardbirds and stuff. And he must have heard Mike Bloomfield with his Fender Tele and his Fender Bassman, that clean sound. I thought I need something a bit more gritty than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess I don't know what. Obviously, Muddy Waters and stuff. They all play Gibsons.
Yeah, well, Muddy had a Tele too, didn't he? But his guitar players were all using Gibsons. So
Hubert Sumlin, great Hubert Sumlin, Did they use? They must have used Fenders, did they? Or did they use other stuff?
I'm pretty sure it'd be Fenders. I think Carl and I had this discussion on one of the Stones shows, and I think Carl went and did some research, and the majority of them were Fenders.
Yeah. So they still have that kind of clean sound, that kind of, in a way that obviously the Marshall took it to a different place.
Absolutely.
Which makes it to that groundbreaking thing that they wanted to do. Really. Yeah.
Shame there's no footage. Shame there's no film.
There's not, is there? Interestingly, no footage. No, that's even then. Yeah. Well, it sounded like they're a bit more underground than that, and not really because they hadn't any hits or anything. Like John Mayer hadn't any hits, so not that means you didn't appear on television, but in those days you probably had to have had something, or maybe been on regional telly or something like that. Nobody's discovered it.
They weren't pop enough.
Well, no. Eric, one thing he didn't want to be was pop, did he? He wanted to be the purest thing.
That's why he walked away from the Yardbirds.
I've said this before. The other thing, just to sort of code it, that the thing that made me laugh about, in a sense, about the story, is that his commitment to the Blues Breakers seemed to be minimal. He joined for a bit, did some stuff, went off to Greece, with his mates, got into a bit of havoc in Greece, came back, got to the port, rung up the Royal Mail, can my old job back? Yeah, all right then.
It's interesting that you should say that, because in Philip Norman's book, he's interviewing the drummer of the band at the time, and he said, Flint. And Flint is saying that Eric was on fire. He was on fire for the band to do really, really well. He was totally committed, but he knew by observing Eric that Eric was a guy that could only be focused on something for a short period of time.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yes, and I think that's probably right, isn't it? Cindy had a solo crew. He went through Yardbirds, John Miles Bluegrass, Cream, and 2 years max in each one. It did strike me as being amusing that his seemingly, if you read just the story, that his commitment seemed to be like slightly minimal. I'm just off to Greece with my mates, so my old guy from pre-Yardbirds. It's like, would you do that? Would you just knock off? And then, so he gets Peter Green. He got Peter Green, as a sort of sub for him for a bit. And then he comes back, phones you out. Yeah, can my old job back? Yeah, it's fine. So, break an album, we're going.
Greece hasn't actually kind of worked for me. There's some guys here that I want to punch my head in,
They've discovered, wasn't one of these, they discovered he was Eric Clapton.
Yeah.
And then they wanted to keep him.
Yeah.
Which I think is really funny.
They wanted to turn him
you really are Eric Clapton.
A sex slave or something.
music slave, locked in a garage, only let out to play. I think that's really funny. It's like the discovery that you've got the real Eric Clapton. No, that's him.
Yeah,
right. To run away. Yes.
Yeah. And left his guitar there for collateral or whatever.
Or was it one of his amps?
Or his amp? Yeah. Left something behind anyway.
Quite a lot, probably. But that did strike me as funny. It's kind of when you read it like that, without, and I haven't read the Philip Norman book, so I don't know what Huey Flint thought. But you see, you turn up, you go away again for 3 months, go to Greece, mess about, then you come back, get your old job back, play a bit more, make an album, leave, bye. I've got something else to do now. It's like, seemingly wayward commitment. I think the interesting thing is that John Mayall didn't care, did he? He's like, fine, if I get one thing out of, I'll just find somebody else. I know Peter Green, another young fiery kid who can play. That'll do.
and by all accounts, Peter Green was okay with that. He learnt something. I'll go and do something else. That's no problem
for a bit. No, I know. It's weird, isn't it? It's kind of, almost in a sort of, in a funny kind of pre-ego days. It's like, I'll dep for a bit, and if Eric comes back, it's fine, carry on. I'm over here if you need me. It's different perspective. I think kind of thing. I
Janice was asking us, in a roundabout kind of way, are we going to do something on the Yardbirds? So we should discuss them on a future show.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. We decided not to do chronological order. We decided to jump about.
Yeah. We're just going to be jumping beans, Janice.
Which is fine with me, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing I say about the blues program is, of course, the brass section. You mentioned them earlier, having brass, having a sort of almost a kind of soul review thing going on. With it as well, that I think is really interesting. And so
who scored that? Who would have organised? Is that something that Mike Vernon would have done?
I think Mike did it. Yeah, I think Mike got them in. To do, and Mayall actually. I think Mayall had seen them play.
Wow.
No, he'd seen play, and he thought, I'll get them in. So he brought them in to come and play on some of the tracks. Because obviously many of the original Chicago blues guys had used horn sections. They had horn sections.
Totally influenced by them.
So totally influenced, yeah. But having a more in-depth knowledge. I mean, and then saying, yeah, we can incorporate horns into this.
Wow.
Which is, I mean, yeah, but of course, if I think, I mean, the Brussels Affair, the album I sent you, the Stones one, has got horns on it. It's got, a horn section on it.
But the Stones were using horns back then.
They weren't using back then, but they used them a bit later, didn't they? Kind of augmentation of that, kind of thing. So I think that, that Chicago guys were already using them, and
did Cream record anything with horns?
Don't think so. No, I think they stayed pretty much purist 3-piece, didn't they?
Yeah, there was. I can't recall anything. No, Blind Faith. There was nothing with horns in Blind Faith.
No, Blind Faith had keyboards, of course, didn't it? Because Steve Winwood played organ
and a violin.
Yeah, Rick Gretsch. Yeah, but so not horns. No. So then horns later, and
pretty groundbreaking then.
Yeah. So I think, but paying attention to your roots and your sources, but paying attention to the details. Oh, look, that guy's there. They're using horns on those tracks, and whatever. And not excluding it. And just going, I've got a 4-piece, a 3-piece. It's just bass, drums, guitar kind of thing. I think one of John Mayall's things, isn't it? Other stuff, other people can come and play. And having that, he's famous, isn't he, for having that encyclopedic kind of knowledge and how he had all those records, didn't he? Because Clapton went to live with him when he first joined the Blues Brothers, locked himself in a small room and listened to his large blues collection. Because he always had a large blues collection
for 3 months. So he was listening to this music and then going and playing it.
Completely, but immersing yourself in all those records that John Mayall, has
phenomenal,
still has, but and kind of that kind of library thing, of those records and the breadth of their influence and what they had on them. It's not just but a harp and a bit of guitar kind of thing. That's part of it.
This guy here, Philip Norman's got a nice little story about how they went to go and pick up Eric to take him back to go and live with him, and John Mayall's wife was with them, and she said that Eric was scared. He was scared to leave his grandparents. He looked at his grandmother to get a nod from the grandmother to say it's okay to go.
It's okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. In a sense, that's the two sides of Eric, though, isn't it? That kind of introverted kind of, still wants some, but also that kind of drive to create something new and, passionate and fiery and stuff. Be a performer. And there's still that dichotomy, isn't there?
Maybe he was just being. Maybe he was just being respectful to Simon. Maybe he was nodding at his grandparents, who he thought for a long time were his parents. He's nodding, just maybe, is it okay? Because this is it. Once I go,
I'm gone.
Yeah. So who knows? But I like hearing stuff like that, because that puts the humanism behind these guys that we love as idols, as guitar players. They're not that far removed from us, are they, Simon?
No, completely. Yeah, well, possibly.
Better guitar players.
Damn them.
Doesn't mean
too late for me.
That doesn't mean we don't keep trying.
No, we keep trying, and we keep getting a little bit better every day to kind of improvement.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you and I have had this conversation a few times, and Carl and I have mentioned it too. There's a few people that I know that want to play the guitar, and they're getting on a bit. And I said to them, don't worry, don't let this idea of age don't hold you back. If you want to play the guitar, go and buy the guitar, set some time aside, and if you're if you're in your 40s, it's fine. You're going to get better.
Never mind that. Did you see? Do you know Showman Blues?
Yes,
He comes. Well, he started in about when he's about 70.
that's
Or something,
correct.
you know, he started about 3 years ago when in his late. Well done.
Yes.
That's hats off to him massively for that. You know, I like that. I think I'm going to start.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's like anything, Simon. You know, you have to put the time aside. You know, and you might drop it, you know, for a couple of times and go back to it. And but I always warn people, if you do get the bug,
You'll get the bug.
yeah,
Yeah, you will. Yeah.
it'll be a niche like no other.
No. And listen, I think I need to go and start making toast and things
Awesome, my friend.
for my
I
children to get them to
appreciate you
school.
jumping on board.
That's right. That was good. Fantastic. It was really, really good fun. And we'll do next week.
Yeah, I look forward to it. And
I'm all right
just
for
gonna
next week. The week after I am in Italy, so we'll have to. That's right. That'll just stop me doing it from the hotel, mind you. But
we look forward
we'll
to
see. I'll think about
doing a
that.
show on your Italian tour.
Well, yes. Well, yes. We could do. Yes, we could do. We could do my Italian experience while I'm there.
Look forward to it.
All right. Fantastic.
Okay. Do you want to do a quick shout out to everybody before we go?
Yep. Yes. Thanks to Janice, Jimmy T. Who else? We've got Todd, aka Soda Pop. Thanks, guys, for dropping in, saying hi. Very cool.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, guys. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for tuning in.
Take care, guys. See you soon. Bye.